you today. I want to start off by saying that we've had some really good discussions, particularly Thursday. We managed to get the proponents of the Lakeside and the Tucker proposals together in a room to hammer out their final differences on the boundaries between these two proposals. They did that. There was a map immediately prior to that had been out there in the public domain, and there were really only a couple of other issues with regard to that map that were still in dispute as we entered these discussions on Thursday. We worked them out. Those were some very difficult discussions that occurred over the course of several hours on Thursday afternoon. I was asked to participate in those mainly because I haven't been involved in this issue. I am generally favorable to the cause of cityhood personally. I have yet to vote against a single city that has been put on the House floor for a vote. Fully support the right of folks to vote in favor of, fully support the right of folks to consider a cityhood referendum and to decide for themselves how they want to be governed. And so we reached a deal, and I think it's a good deal between Tucker and Lakeside. The next issue after that became, well, Lakeside has a bill, Senate Bill 270, and Tucker was anticipated to go in a House bill that did not meet the crossover day deadline and is being handled as general legislation, so it really can't go forward. And how do we then deal with that particular problem if this is all to move forward as a package deal? We ultimately arrived at a solution to that would be a special exception to the local legislation requirements. That would cover just this particular situation. The problem with that is that it makes a significant change, albeit for a limited purpose and for a limited time, to long-standing procedures with regard to how local legislation is handled in the General Assembly. Very significant procedures that we all rely on as legislators. And I want to say I'm very proud of the Tucker and the Lakeside proponents who sat down and hammered out this deal. But ultimately, making those changes in the local legislation requirements is going to be a very significant, steep hill to climb. It is something that I am not entirely comfortable with, personally, and there have been discussions with really throughout House leadership today with regard to whether we should move forward with Senate Bill 95 with some changes that would enable that special exception to the local legislation requirements in order to allow all of this to happen. That's a special exception to very long-standing procedures that we should be very, very careful with in the General Assembly, and that as a House we should be very, very careful with. And so the ultimate judgment on that is to not move forward with Senate Bill 95 with those amendments in there. There are a number of members who concur with that judgment, but I personally, as a party to these discussions, certainly concur with that decision that really has been made as a group. I also want to say that I'm very, very proud of this compromise that was reached. I'm asking the committee today not to move forward with any of these bills so that we can come back and do this the right way in 2015 under the existing local legislation procedures without changing those, because this really should be a package deal, because it is a deal that has been struck in good faith between the parties. But I also want to say that I reject the notion, which has been stated out there in the public domain, that this is some kind of a backroom deal. Because at the end of the day, I don't know how you get two parties to come to an agreement until you sit them down at a table and get them to talk over their differences in a room. And that's what happened on Thursday. I fully support this compromise between Tucker and Lakeside. I hope that it will continue forward in the future, but I do think that changing the local legislation procedures in order to make this deal move forward is too steep a hill to climb. I also think that it is probably not what we should be doing in order to make this happen. I would ask the committee to just hold on all of this for this year, so that we can come back next year and do this with two standalone bills under the existing local legislation procedures going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any questions for Representative Jacobs? Mr. Fleming, Representative Fleming.
So Lakeside has a bill in front of us right now, correct?
That is correct.
So could we pass that bill and then let Tucker do that bill next year?
The committee could do that. But I will say this. Part of the deal struck Thursday in order to allow both of these proposals to move forward was that they would move together in tandem.
Why is that necessary? I mean, Lakeside's going through the process. They've got a bill in front of us. Can't we just vote on their bill? I mean, if the borders aren't going to be affected by moving the Lakeside bill forward, what's going to stop us from moving the Tucker bill next year?
Let me recognize Chairman Meadows to speak to that, sir.
I was a part of that and that deal making Thursday afternoon, where we brought in the people that have represented Lakeside for who knows when, and the people who represented Tucker. So I don't feel bad one way or the other about the deal or the compromise they came up on lines. However, I will agree with Mr. Jacobs. Part of that deal is they would move in tandem to get through. And I will stick with that. They'll have to move in tandem. Y'all, the cold hard facts are you passed 95, it's got to come over there to the Rules Committee, and I've got all kind of legal counsel telling me I'm fixing to change the rules of this House, and I am not going to do that.
And Mr. Chairman, I am not prepared to ask this committee to do that either.
Representative Fleming, anything else, sir? Chairman Meadows? No. All right. Right now, I'll acknowledge Senator Miller. Make sure I got the right mic, sir. There we go.
Since I was just told this, it's sort of I didn't come up with Senate Bill 95 or another bill to be utilized as a vehicle. I don't often quote the AJC, but last week I was quoted in the AJC, and I didn't think Tucker had the time to happen for them this year. But I will tell you this, the Lakeside people had 75 meetings. They followed the process. They have a bill. And what you're basically telling 70,000 people is they don't get the opportunity to vote this year. I'm on record. I will not bring this bill back next year. I appreciate particularly Representative Chairman Jacobs' work because what we basically did, by the way, the only change in the map from last week when this bill was tabled. The rest of the Pleasantdale precinct, maybe 7,000 homes or residences, went to Lakeside, and Executive Park went to Lakeside. That's the whole change. There wasn't anything dramatic. There wasn't anything overwhelming here. And I will tell you, it's very disappointing to me, and I'll be partisan, as a Republican, when I can see the House pass the South Fulton bill in less than a week, which is not exactly a Republican stronghold. We got a lot of Republican voters out here this year. And, you know, the House has their rules, how they do business. Disappointment is probably an easy way for me to say it at this point, because I don't get it. I think Representative Fleming hit it on the head. These people followed the rules. Here's their bill. It's still sitting here. It's been sitting here. We've had buku hearings. We've had all of that. I think this is the fourth or fifth hearing, I think, at this particular point in time, probably. And they never even got a vote. And I'm not asking for a vote. I mean, I'm not going to take on the rules, Chairman. I appreciate his candor, and I always have appreciated his candor. Do I think this is wrong? Yeah, I think it's wrong. I think we have not been fair to these people. I also said I would support Tucker next year. Heck, I'm supporting South Fulton. I was going to ask for it in rules today in the Senate, when the other Democratic representatives wouldn't, who still have never voted for a city except for South Fulton, I might add. So, Mr. Chairman, I think at this point in time there's no point even having any further discussions. But I do think these people were not treated fairly. And unfortunately, if I was them, I would be very, very upset. And I doubt if you'll see them back here next year. I really do. Because when you go through all of this, I've been through city things. I've been through his city. I've been through Dunwoody. I've been through Peachtree Corners. I've been through Sandy Springs. A lot of you haven't, okay? And my final comment's that when Republicans don't let people vote for self-determination for their form of government, then shame on us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments from members of the committee? Well, I think we've heard Representative Chairman Jacobs. Anything additional?
And certainly I have tremendous respect for my senator and the work that he has put into this legislation, and frankly, for the proponents of both cities that ultimately were poised to move forward if something could be worked out. But ultimately, like Chairman Meadows, I gave my word as part of this deal that Lakeside and Tucker would move forward in tandem, and that's really not going to be possible unless we make a significant change in the local legislation procedures. And so I've asked the committee, for that reason, I've asked the committee to do what we appear to be on the verge of doing, and certainly appreciate everybody's consideration and your time.
Thank you, Chairman Jacobs. All right, I just want to add that I've done my best as the vice chair of this committee to listen to all of the parties. I've got thousands and thousands of emails, and I've met with folks who represent all three cities. And as Chairman Jacobs and as Senator Miller, I always want to, as much as possible, give the local folks a chance to vote to determine what form of government they live with. And I'm not going to tell you that I'm happy with this outcome. I'm not. I wish that we had been able to find a way to move these bills forward this year. That would be my preference. But as you've heard here, it is too risky, I believe, and I agree with Chairman Jacobs that the fix I think would cause more problems than it would solve, and I think that is the problem that we face right now. I can't tell you that I talked with Chairman Amy Carter. We have a rule that's our rule this year, and has been for a couple of years here in the Governmental Affairs Committee, that cityhood proposals must go through a 2-year process. That does not have to be the rule of this committee, and I have advised her, and she is very open to discussing it, and in fact I won't speak for her, but would look favorably upon waiving that rule, or not even including that as a rule of this committee when we come back next year to rewrite the rules of this committee, to allow these two proposals to move forward in the traditional fashion next year, if that is what the what the people want to do. So at this time, I think that we have heard, and I would recommend this committee take Chairman Jacobs' recommendation and not move on any of these bills at this time. I guess we need a... Yes, sir.
I'll make it
Senator
easy.
Miller.
I'll make it easy for you. You only have one bill. I'll withdraw it right now.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. With that being said, hearing no other comments, we will move to adjourn this meeting.